Alright, so let's define a class. I'm going to go over the pieces of a class, more complex than what we've been doing so far, but within the scope of the things that we've been doing as well. So we're just going to expand on what we've been learning and get to know classes in great detail, because classes are really the most important part of working within C#, because once you know and understand and can master classes, you're able to do just about anything really, because classes are the foundation of just about everything. What we're going to do, we're going to implement some constructors. These are constructors. We'll talk about that. This is the default constructor. You can also just work with it from copying and pasting without having any additional information here that you're looking at. We're looking at the Defining Classes project in the Classes folder, and you can just follow along if you like, or open up the project as you wish. To start, classes are defined with the class keyword, as we are familiar with. You give your class name. A capital C is something you can use most often, or you can just type out class if you want to. The name of the game is that you want to try to be as concise as possible, because when you use your classes a lot, if your names are really, really long, it depends on what you need to do, then it just makes everything much longer when you're actually working with your classes, a lot more typing. So big C, this can be used to do that. Little c can be a char, for example. Now every class is going to have a name, as you see here, and it's also going to have a set of members that are going to be enclosed within these curly brackets here, as you can see, as usual. Members are going to be your fields, which can be also called instance variables, your methods. Some people might call them functions, but they're methods, functions, similar things, but method is more precise. You have constructors, like I mentioned. This is a custom constructor because we're not just passing open and close paren, we're actually passing parameters here, arguments to our method calls, surrounded in curly brackets. You can have multiples if you'd like. You see that we have a custom constructor here that takes a string here, and then it takes an integer, a different one. So these are different methods. To us, they look very similar, but to the computer, they're different methods, and we'll explain that as well. Later, you have what is called an instance method, and this is a method that is just like an instance variable or a field. This is your method, or one of your methods that you can actually create within your classes, because your methods here are going to be providing functionality, like your variables are going to be holding data or referring to data. So these methods are going to be called. This is what your class is going to do. If you had a car class, for example, this could be a class that's going to be start engine, for example, which performs the action of actually starting your engine. As you know, if you have a car, you don't actually go anywhere unless you start the engine, but just because you have a car, you don't necessarily have the engine on all the time. The starting the engine could also be your default or your custom constructor as well, if you see what I mean. So another method might be drive to work, or something like that. More or less an action. It's doing something. It could also set the values of your particular instance variables as well. You need an entry point into your class, because your class is really a box. You can think of it as a closed box, a black box, whatever you want to. There are entry points into your class, and usually this is going to be methods or properties. We'll talk about properties as well. Additionally, you can have a destructor. Now, the C#.NET connection, .NET makes destructing your or destroying your objects very, very easy, but you can also create your own destructor. C++ programmers are going to be used to working with destructors to gracefully close out things when you're done with the class. You can get rid of variables, get rid of memory requirements, take a load off the memory, for example. You want to end gracefully, but in C# you don't necessarily need a destructor as much as you think you do. You might not need it at all, necessarily, depending on what you're doing, because this is the first time we've seen destructors. So we've already started working with classes, and, we haven't seen a destructor yet, so, we don't necessarily need that. But we'll talk about that as well. Now, then we have another class here. That first class there, that's a utility class. We're using it to do something else, but this is our main class. As you can see, C main class, and this is going to hold our main entry point, because we still need a main entry point into the file there. That means we don't necessarily have to have multiple classes in one file. You could put this separately if you wanted to, and that's usually how you want to do things. One file per class, one CS file per class, but in this case, it keeps things nice and concise. It's a small application. So there we go. Our main class, as you've seen, this is typical of what we've been doing within curly brackets.